What's up, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the first ever Quite Naturally live show. I've been working on this for the past couple weeks now, trying to make sure everything was set up and ready to go, and I think we're about good. I meant to go live at 5. It's 5:10 right now. Had to work out a few extra kinks towards the end, but all that doesn't matter now. All that matters is that we're live right now. Hold on. My chair kind of sucks. It keeps falling down. Look, it's going to be a work in progress. We all just going to have to grow together. But in tonight's show, I'm not going to go too hard. I'm just going to talk about a few different topics. I'm going to talk about NFL teams that I feel could have a much improved season than they had last year. And I'm also going to do a full SEC overview, going through every single team, addressing what their biggest question mark for the team might be from like the fan base perspective. And then I'm still debating it. It's going to be like a spur of the moment decision. I think I'm going to take my top 3 to 4 teams from the SEC that I can see playing in the SEC championship and maybe even a dark horse for the conference. So let's go ahead and get started. I hope the stream's going pretty well. See, I got about 6 people in here right now, which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Just glad anybody joined. But all right, let's start with the first team here. I think it's pretty obvious. We're going to go with the Philadelphia Eagles. When you look at all the moves the Philadelphia Eagles have made this offseason, it's hard not to see them improve, especially with how talented their roster already is, with the crazy wide receiving core including A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, You still have Jalen Hurts throwing the rock, and then you add a guy like Saquon Barkley. They bring back C.J. Gardner-Johnson, his past 2 seasons have been very injury riddled, but when healthy, he's a difference maker in the secondary. And then you go out and draft guys like Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, guys that were a toss-up for the top DB in this past NFL draft class. It's hard not to see this already super talented team improve. So the main thing is, what was the problem last year? Because this team started off hot. I want to say they started off around 10-0. I don't know exactly, but they started off as arguably one of the best teams in the NFL. But they went 1-7 in their last 8 games. Why? Well, you can point to a number of different things that contributed to that. The offense was terrible after a while. I'm not sure what happened. Well, actually, there are a lot of things that happened. The offensive coordinator obviously didn't gel. I can't remember the guy's name, but that shows. Look, it shows why I don't remember his name, because he wasn't doing anything right. The wide receiver, see, I'm sitting here struggling. I'm not used to being live. But, it just didn't work out. The offensive coordinator was not a hit. So what they do, they went out and got Kellen Moore, a guy who's been a nice young offensive coordinator throughout the league. He had a pretty good year in Dallas a few years back. And now last year, he was the offensive coordinator for the LA Chargers, where even though their team wasn't the greatest, they had a pretty dynamic offense. And Keenan Allen had just about a career resurgence. A lot of people thought he might have been getting a little old for it, which he still is, but last year he put up insane numbers. So you go ahead and get Kellen Moore and bring him to this team with guys like Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown. This is something that can really click. And then they went out and added Saquon Barkley, who somehow I left off this offseason moves list. He was arguably their biggest offensive move. Hold on. Dude, this chair sucks. I don't know. Dude, this chair is going to drive me crazy. I already know. It keeps shrinking, goes down a peg every time I talk. It's terrible. And it keeps throwing me off. But yeah, I don't know how I left Saquon Barkley off this list, but he's arguably the biggest move they made this offseason. Bringing him in, a guy who struggled with injuries his entire NFL career, but when healthy is not even an argument. When healthy, he is a top 5 back in the NFL, and you could argue top 3. Saquon Barkley's that good. So you go out, add him to this offense. The offensive line's already solid. You bring in a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. This could be all the difference for them, but they didn't just stop there. They went out and got Vic Fangio, a guy who's probably been a defensive coordinator longer than I've been breathing. He's been all over the league, and the fact that he is still a defensive coordinator and has been one for that long shows his ability to grow. He grows, he shifts, he changes his defensive schemes. He's not just a one-trick pony like Dabo Swinney down the street. He is willing to change and grow with the game, and that's a perfect guy to bring in. Because this Eagles defense kind of stalled out last year. They struggled at linebacker, so they bring in Devin White, a guy who's trying to get his career back on track after leaving Tampa. There are a lot of things going on with this team, a lot of people they are bringing in to try to fix these problems, and I think it's going to work. Bringing in C.J. Gardner-Johnson is definitely going to help the secondary. Drafting those 2 young corners doesn't hurt either. I've seen a lot of great clips from Quinyon Mitchell in training camp. He looks outstanding. And then adding Kellen Moore to this offense, I think is going to make a world's difference. Now, their schedule isn't easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think this Eagles team is going to improve. And if you can really just improve that offense a little bit, get them back to where they were when they played in the Super Bowl, This is a team that could once again represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. They are that good. Their ceiling is that high. Then, as I already said a second ago, adding a guy like Saquon Barkley, that just takes their team to the next level. Running the ball and catching out of the backfield, he's ridiculous, almost impossible to get to the ground. The Eagles are bound to improve this year. Another team I really think is going to improve this year is the Tennessee Titans. I know a lot of people aren't really high on the Titans because they say every time a player that was really good goes there, it's like going to a retirement home. But I really like this Tennessee Titans team. They showed some good signs last year. They went out and got Calvin Ridley because they did need some help in the receiver room. DeAndre Hopkins is out for 6 weeks. They added him before that, which really hurts. It hurts my whole argument because having DeAndre Hopkins was key to it. But he's down right now, but they still got Calvin Ridley, guy who was wide receiver 1 for the Jaguars last year. A lot of people don't think the Jaguars used him correctly, so maybe he can be utilized right in this offense. But they went out and stacked up the defense. They went out and got L'Jarius Sneed, a guy who was arguably the best corner in football last year. They went out and got Jamal Adams, who a lot of people think is just a glorified outside linebacker, but he can still play a little bit of ball at strong safety. Quandre Diggs, also from Seattle. He was a beast the past few years at Seattle. Very underrated, but he was a monster. Tony Pollard had a bit of a... He didn't really do as much as people thought he was going to do last season, but he's still a serviceable back. And then when you have a guy like Tyjae Spears also in that backfield, that gives you a nice two-headed monster at the running back position. And then they also have their quarterback, Will Levis. Will Levis played a lot of snaps last year. He got to play a lot of meaningful ball last year. And... It was pretty solid. He showed a lot. He showed a lot for Titans fans to get excited for. Hold on. This chair is going to be the death of me. But he showed a lot of flashes of things Titans fans could be excited for in the future. His arm is off the charts. I mean, his arm's dynamite. That's what got him drafted so high because he didn't do much at Kentucky. He didn't do a thing at Notre Dame. But his arm is what got people high on Will Levis. And he flashed that a lot last year, throwing a few deep balls to DeAndre Hopkins. He had 4 touchdown passes in the game against the Atlanta Falcons towards the end of the season last season. He's showing a lot of people what he can do. So going out, keeping DeAndre Hopkins, who's injured right now and will be out the first 6 weeks of the season, okay. But they go out and get Calvin Ridley. They still have Treylon Burks, who hasn't yet shown what he was so hyped up to be coming out of college, but I still think he can be just that. He's like a 6'4" Deebo Samuel. He's a freak athlete. He can really play any position on the field. He's one of those gadget guys, one of those unique guys where when you find the right space for him in your offense, the sky's the limit for what he can do for you. I still believe in Treylon Burks. He has like the biggest hands in the world. He wore like a 4X glove when he was at Arkansas. It was ridiculous. Look up the video. It's on ESPN somewhere. But I'm a believer in this team. Now, they're in an extremely tough division. The AFC South is no slouch. They got the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, if they have an offensive line, could be a playoff team. They have the Houston Texans, and everyone knows what they've done. C.J. Stroud had the greatest rookie quarterback season of all time. Then they went out and add Stephon Diggs, add Joe Mixon to that offense, then go load up the defense even more with Danielle Hunter. That's a team that wants to compete for a Super Bowl this year. So it's not going to be easy making it out of the AFC South. Oh, excuse me. I almost forgot to mention the Indianapolis Colts, who went 9-8 last season without their starting quarterback. So when you add him, Anthony Richardson, back into the fold, what does that make them? I think it makes them a bona fide playoff team because he showed at the beginning of the season that he's a monster when he's healthy. As long as he's not taking as many big hits this season, the sky's also the limit for that Colts team. So the AFC South is going to be a really, really good division this year, and it's going to be hard for all of these teams. But I do think the Titans are going to improve a lot. They have an all-new head coach who a lot of people aren't really that high on, former offensive coordinator from the Bengals. He's come in for them. A lot of people, myself included, don't really see why they fired Mike Vrabel. I'm going to throw this chair out and just stand up the rest of the stream, I swear. But, yeah, a lot of us don't really understand why they even felt the need to throw out Mike Vrabel, but they did it anyway, so the past in the past has already happened. But this is a team that can really stand to improve a lot this year. I mean, they weren't terrible. I think they went around 7-10 last season. They weren't the worst team in the NFL, but they also weren't the best. They underachieved the Titan standards. That's a team that's been very good the past few years. They lose Derrick Henry, but I think they've added enough to really make a big difference and really grow this season. Now, lastly, I'm going to go to the Carolina Panthers. Now, they went 2-15 last year. So saying that they're going to improve isn't really saying too much, because how hard is it to improve from a 2-win team? But as bad as this Panthers team was last year, that's saying a lot, because Bryce Young underachieved to a lot of people's standards last season. He didn't have the greatest season in the world, only threw for 2,800 yards, 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, completed 59.8% of his passes. A lot of people weren't happy. And a lot of people are ready to chalk him up as a bust right now. But I'm not ready to do that because I don't think Bryce Young had enough help around him. He was the second most sacked quarterback in the NFL last year. Let that sink in. The second most sacked quarterback in the NFL last year. It doesn't matter if you put Patrick Mahomes back there. If you get sacked that many times, you're not going to be able to do much. Now, I'm not comparing Bryce Young to Patrick Mahomes here, but Bryce Young was the number 1 overall pick for a reason. He's extremely talented. He was the best thing on those Alabama teams when he was playing there, outside of maybe the year Jameson Williams was there because he was just a freak that year at Bama. But I digress. So when you go out and get a guy like that and there's nothing really to help him on the team, I don't really know how you expect him to have success. An aging Adam Thielen was his best receiver last year. And Adam Thielen isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination right now, but in this stage of his career, he should be nobody's wide receiver 1. I'm going to have to get a new chair by next stream. This is ridiculous. And it's hot down here. It looks like I'm sweating. I'm not, but it is hot. Anyway, I keep getting off topic. But yeah, let's talk about their offseason move. So they go out and get Jadeveon Clowney, a guy who had over 10 sacks last year on that Baltimore Ravens defensive front 7. You go out and get Deontay Johnson, get Jatavian Sanders, 2 big-time pass catchers that can really help Bryce Young develop into that next level. Because Deontay Johnson's extremely quarterback-friendly. He had over 100 targets his past couple years at the with the Steelers, 100 receptions. I mean, the past couple years with the Steelers. I guess 100 receptions and 100 targets kind of go hand in hand. I didn't have to correct myself there. But very quarterback-friendly option. Go out and get a big-body tight end, the number 2 tight end in this draft class behind Brock Bowers, Jatavian Sanders from the University of Texas. Then you go out and get Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis to help bolster up the interior of that offensive line to try to help give Bryce Young some time. And then those two also help with the running game. So you go out and get a guy in Jonathan Brooks from the University of Texas, a guy who ran for over 1,100 yards last season and 10 touchdowns. I mean, you're giving Bryce Young every tool he needs to be successful. And I do think these things, and Xavier Legette isn't even on this list. The graph wasn't big enough. Big-time wide receiver from South Carolina that they drafted at the beginning of the second round this past season. This is a team that is due to improve. It's when you add this many pieces to that team, it's hard not to improve. Now it's all on Bryce Young because he has the weapons. He has an improved offensive line. They had a defense last season. So now that he has all those things at his disposal, if he doesn't take that next step, then it's all just on him. If he doesn't take that next step, then I'm willing to listen to the bus conversations. But I don't think he's going to regress. I don't think he's going to be the same as last year either. I think he's going to improve. I don't think the Panthers are going to be the best team in football just out of nowhere like that, like how the Texans are looking. But I can see them being a 6 to 7 win team this season, much improved, a tough out for almost anybody they face. I think this Panthers team has done enough to really take that next step and to get out of that top 5 pick category. Now, hold on. Look, I'm struggling with this chair, y'all. I can't see the live chat at the moment, but I'm struggling. This chair drops every couple seconds. I'm trying to get the hang of it. Shoot, I'm sitting here sweating everything. Look, I hope everything's going well right now for the stream. I can't hear it or anything, but this little status bar in the right corner says excellent. This is my first time ever streaming. I'm pretty sure everybody in here knows me. I'm just trying to get the hang of it. It's the first one. First of many, though. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep going, keep on pushing, keep on chopping wood. We're going to get better and better as time goes on. But let's go ahead and hop into our next segment. Let's talk about the SEC. There are a lot of big-time questions for every SEC team this season. The SEC has about 76 teams in it this season. It feels like 16. But it's a big season this year, and we're getting closer and closer. So I figured now's a better time than ever to go through every single SEC team and say, what's the biggest question from the fan base? Let's go in alphabetical order here. Let's start with the University of Alabama. How fast can Kalen DeBoer adjust to the SEC? I think that's the big question for everybody right now. Now that Nick Saban's moved on and Kalen DeBoer's taken over, a lot of people don't think he's just going to be able to hop right in and have immediate success like he's had at every other stop he's made. Because the West Coast football is not the same as SEC football. That's true. It's a very grueling schedule. You have teams like Georgia, Auburn, a road game at Arkansas, at Florida, Texas. You have a bunch of very talented teams, very talented and deep teams that you're going to have to play week in and week out. People don't think he's going to be able to recruit in the South. Well, he's already proven people wrong there. But that's the biggest question for Alabama fans right now. Will he be able to adjust to SEC play? Honestly, I think he will be able to. He's already showing that he's able to get out and recruit with the best of them. Alabama has the #1 recruiting class, and I want to say the 2026 class right now. He's killing in the transfer portal as well. He lost a lot of players, but he's also brought in a lot of players. I think he's going to adjust very well because DeBoer is a darn good football coach. And I think he's going to put a lot of people on notice. He's going to shock a lot of people when these Alabama teams don't really have much of a fall off at all. They actually might be improved because the past couple seasons, last couple seasons under Nick Saban, Alabama struggled at home. Every time a big-time team like Texas A&M or LSU came in, or even when they went on the road, they just struggled, period, especially on the road. I started off saying at home. I meant to say especially on the road, they've struggled. And I really think their defense is going to be improved, and I think their offense could be improved as well. They have one of the best defensive staffs in the country this year. So will DeBoer be able to adjust to the SEC? I think so. He's already shown a lot of people by getting out and killing it on the recruiting trail. Look, I'm going to throw this chair away right after the stream ends. Watch. Now, let's go to Arkansas. Where's it coming from, Pittman? That's just what I put down as a question. Where is it coming from? Where is the production going to come from? Last year, Arkansas lost 5 games by 1 possession. It was ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. And that was with KJ Jefferson, their quarterback who I feel like has been playing there for 17 and a half years. So now you're losing KJ Jefferson. Where's that production coming from? Because a lot of those games were close just because of what KJ Jefferson was bringing to the table. So now that he's gone, he's transferred down to Orlando. He's at UCF now. Where is it going to come from? And if their production isn't there, is it for Sam Pittman? Because it's looking like it is. And I'm a big-time Sam Pittman fan. I love Sam Pittman. I love the energy he's brought to Arkansas. He's a great head coach. But as of right now, Arkansas does not have it. And looking at them in the preseason, it's hard to see he's going to have his job next season. Now, I'm not calling for his job or anything, but based on what I've seen over the past couple seasons, they're just on a downward spiral. It's not looking too good for Arkansas right now. But if I was a fan, that would be my biggest question. Where's the production going to come from? Now with Auburn, how fast can everything get started? That's the main thing if I'm an Auburn fan. Can the turnaround start this year? Because last year wasn't the worst year in the world, wasn't the best year, lost the game to New Mexico State, but then came extremely close to beating Georgia, lost to them in the fourth quarter. And it took a miracle from Jalen Milroe for Alabama to beat them. So it seemed like the team was close in some aspects. They would rise to the occasion some games. But then, like I said, they lost to New Mexico State the week before they played Alabama. So there were times where they dropped back down. So can this year be that year? Because Auburn's doing very well in the transfer portal, getting KJ Lambert-Smith from Penn State, their top receiver. They're killing it in recruiting as well with some big-time players, a very big-time wide receiver coming in this year. A lot of people feel like he's going to be one of their primary sources of production this season. Can they turn it around? What will it take? Well, I think it'll take a big-time year for Peyton Thorne. Will Peyton Thorne return to how he was at Michigan State? Because he was on that Michigan State team that year where Kenneth Walker was balling out. Keon Coleman was on that team. Extremely talented Michigan State team that played in the New Year's Six Bowl. Can Peyton Thorne return to that level, or will he play at the same level he played at last year? And if he does end up at the same level he was at last year, will that be enough? Will the rest of the team be good enough to be like an 8 to 9 win team instead of under 500, barely qualifying for a bowl game? The chair again. Goodness gracious. Oh, let me take a second. Look at the live chat. Herbert had the best rookie season. Justin Herbert did not have the best rookie quarterback season ever as C.J. Stroud. I know that was late, but I'm sitting here reading the live chat, trying to find my rhythm here. Too bad Kentucky's on a 2-year probation. But let's keep moving forward. Let's move on to the Florida Gators. Simple question. Can they survive the schedule? They have the hardest schedule in the SEC. I have it pulled up right here, actually. They start off their season against Miami. Then they play Texas A&M. Then they play UCF, where KJ Jefferson is now the starting quarterback. That brings about 50 years of experience. Then they have a road game at Tennessee. Then they go back home to host Kentucky. Neutral site game against Georgia, the national championship favorites. Then they go to Texas to play the Longhorns. A home game against LSU. Home game against Ole Miss. Then they finish their season against Florida State. Can they survive the schedule? No. Simple. No, they cannot. But will they be a good team? Yes. I think they're going to be a really good team. Graham Mertz had an outstanding year at Florida last year. They just didn't have a great team around him. They have a nice young receiver coming along as well. They have a good running back room. Their defense is not terrible. But this Florida team just has the worst schedule in the country. This Florida team could win 5 games and be power rated in the top 15. They could be a very good, a very competitive team, but just not win a lot of games. And it's not really their fault. Well, it might be whoever made the schedule makers mad is his fault. But it's like, what can you do? I don't think they can overcome the schedule, but I do think this Florida team is going to be a lot better than their record is going to say they were at the end of the season. And I do think their head coach should keep his job after the season, because if they are an improved team, if the team is as good as I think they're going to be, I don't think he should lose his job. But a lot of people are calling for his job already, and then after this season, because they're going to have a losing record. At most, they're going to have 6 wins. People will be calling for his job anymore. I don't think Billy Napier should lose his job. I think he's a darn good head coach, and I think this Florida team is going to be better than their record is going to say. But it's hard to tell from here. Now, the biggest question if I was a Georgia fan, wink, can the defensive line make this team elite? Simple. Because Georgia, hold on. Man, this chair. Georgia's going to be a very good team this year. We all know that. It doesn't take a genius to see that. A blind man can see that from a mile away. But the key with Georgia, what separates a very good Georgia team from a great Georgia team is the defensive line. Those past few years, those years when Georgia won back-to-back, they had a dominant defensive line. First rounders up and down. So can the D-line this year take that next step? Because if they can, that's what's going to separate this Georgia team from the rest of the pack. Because right now, it's Georgia, Ohio State, Texas as the top 3 favorites in pretty much just about every sports book. A lot of people have Ole Miss, Alabama up there even. But in majority of places, those are the top 3. Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas to win the entire thing this year. But the one thing that can separate Georgia from the rest of those teams is an elite defensive line. Because we know the offense is going to be there. Carson Beck is a stud, arguably the best quarterback in the country. Receiving rooms, loaded, locked and loaded, even added more through the transfer portal. Tight end, that counts as the receiver room. The running back room looks great with Branson Robinson and Trevor Etienne. It's the D-line. The D-line is what sets them apart. Quality edge rushers, quality interior pass rushers, run stoppers, and depth along that defensive front 7. That's what can take this Georgia team from good to elite. Now at Kentucky, is Vandagriff the difference? Last year they went out and took a big swing at a transfer quarterback with Devin Leary from NC State. It didn't pan out like a lot of people thought it would. I thought it was going to work out great. I was proven wrong. It didn't. For some reason, Devin Leary could not translate to the SEC. Can Brock Vandagriff do it? Because this Kentucky team is talented. They have a solid defense, a very underrated offense. They just don't have the right captain. They don't have the right guy manning the mission at quarterback, leading the pack. Can Brock Vandagriff be that guy? A lot of talk from Kentucky fall camp, even in spring camp, is that he is definitely that guy. He's a dual threat quarterback. He's a game changer with his legs. Some are calling him a game breaker, but I won't go that far until I see it on the field. They say he has a dynamite arm. I haven't really seen him throw much since the Georgia spring game. I watched him some of the Kentucky spring game as well, but we haven't seen him take live action yet. We haven't seen him really get out there against a live SEC defense that's not wearing the inverse of his jersey. So a lot is yet to be seen. A lot of Kentucky fans are really excited for him. I'm excited to see it happen. I'm glad he's gotten a shot. He sat the bench for about 10 years at Georgia. Now he's finally getting his chance to lead his guys. I'm excited to see it. Now, boy, this chair. I'm not gonna mention the chair again, but it's like I dropped to like 5'4". Then when I adjusted, I'm back to 6'1". Some say I'm 6'4", but to each his own opinion. You know how it goes. Now, the LSU Tigers. Simple. Defense. Will there be a defense this year? Last year there wasn't. They made a lot of improvements to their defensive staff, brought in a lot of new guys, stole a lot of guys from Missouri. But will it be able to translate immediately? Because it wasn't just the defensive staff that was a problem. You can have a bad staff, but if you're loaded up with great defensive players, your defense is still going to be solid. But do they have the right players in there to have a successful defense? Because as I said, the staff is there. But will they have a defense this year? Because that makes all the difference. Because if you take that LSU team from last season with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, Jaden Daniels at quarterback, Heisman winner, That is a team that even if they had a top 20 to 25 defense in the sport, they would have been a playoff team and probably my pick to win the national championship. Excuse me. Their offense was that good. They were just about unstoppable. And a lot of people think they're going to have a lot of big-time playmakers this year as well. Garrett Nussmeier is no slouch at the quarterback position. We've seen what he's been able to do. That time when Jaden Daniels, got injured against Georgia in the SEC championship, he came in and threw for just about 300 yards. He balled out. We know what Garrett Nussmeier can do. But will that defense be there to support him? Will that defense be able to take that LSU team to the next level? If I was a guest right now, I would say no. I think they still have some ways to go. I think Brian Kelly, their head coach, is going to get it together, but I don't think it's just going to be a one-year turnaround. You can't just go from the worst defense in the sport to a top 25 unit in 1 year. Maybe you can. I don't think you can, especially not in the SEC, but we'll see how it goes. Mississippi State. What's this team's identity? What is it? Long live Mike Leach, but ever since he passed away, this team's been struggling to find its identity. When he was the head coach, everybody knew what was coming. Air raid. They were going to throw, Will Rogers was going to come in and throw for about 400 yards on you. Can you stop it? Look, they're going to run a draw play out of nowhere. Their running back's going to break for 40. They were a dynamic offense. It was ridiculous. It was insanely fun to watch. The cowbells ringing loud in Starksville. It was beautiful. But last year, they tried to be a run-first team with air raid personnel. It didn't work out. So now they fired their head coach, bringing in a new guy. What's going to be the identity of this team? That's it. They just have to find something. They have to find their niche like they did with Mike Leach. What is this team's identity? Let's go on over to Missouri. Was last year a fluke? Missouri was one of the most entertaining teams in college football last season. Extremely potent offense led by Brady Cook and Luther Burden. Cody Schrader at running back, who a lot of people just seem to have forgotten about. He was probably the best running back. Let me stop myself. I got a little excited there. He was one of the best running backs in the sport last season. He was insane. Cody Schrader basically beat Ohio State in the bowl game by himself because the offense could get nothing else going. But was last year a fluke? Or is this the new standard for Missouri football? Their head coach, Eli Drinkwitz, sure does believe it's the new standard. I believe. I'm a big fan of Eli Drinkwitz. I love his approach. I love the way he goes out and does it. I think Eli Drinkwitz is a great coach. I think Eli Drinkwitz is a great coach, and I think he's going to kill it. They're going to have another big year this year. They have Brady Cook, Luther Burden coming back, tons of studs in the wide receiver room. Their offense is going to be potent again. They lost a lot defensively, so I do expect them to take a step back there. But I do think this season is going to be another great season for them. But I do want to see how things go once Brady Cook leaves and once Luther Burden leaves. They're two best playmakers on offense. What will this team look like when they leave? Will they take that next step in recruiting? Will they go hard in the portal? It's yet to be seen. They went hard in the portal this past cycle, but will they be able to keep it going? Or is this like a 1 year, 2 year flash up? Move on down to the Oklahoma Sooners, one of the newest teams in the SEC. Darn good team last year led by Dillon Gabriel, but Dillon Gabriel isn't their quarterback anymore. He's up there slinging the rock in Oregon, and they're one of the national championship favorites as well. So what's their biggest question? Their offensive line, and of course, the quarterback position. Because when you lose a guy like Dillon Gabriel, a guy that's the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy this season, it's hard to just replace him. But they think they have their guy in Jackson Arnold. Now, Jackson Arnold didn't have the greatest showing in their bowl game this past year, but the coaching staff is bought in. A lot of the players are bought in. They see the talent. Jackson Arnold was a Elite 11 finalist. I want to say he won it that year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think he won it that year. He's a darn good quarterback. We know he can sling it. But will he? And will that offensive line be able to produce for him? Because last year, they had some problems at the offensive line. They struggled. Is the offensive line unit improved enough to take that next step to give Jackson Arnold the protection that he needs to really produce? That's the big question for Oklahoma. Now, let's go on over to Ole Miss. I just cut a little fan on. I got a little hot down here. If the fan is making a lot of noise in the mic, let me know and I'll cut it off. But it should be good for now. But man, that junk feel good. I was getting a little hot. But let's move on down to Ole Miss. Ole Miss had a great season last year. Jackson Dart was on fire. Quinshon Judkins was probably the best running back in college football now. Now he's breaking people's hearts on NCAA playing with the Ohio State Buckeyes in that crazy spin move. But Ole Miss is a big-time team this year. And a lot of people really expect them to have a great season and really take that next step. But the biggest question is, will the defensive addition that they made in the transfer portal stick? Because that was their biggest problem last year. They weren't all there on defense. So this year, they went all in the transfer portal. I think that's why Lane Kiffin stayed and didn't take the job at Alabama, because I fully expected him to take it. But they have everything they need here to be a national championship contender, and that all starts with the defense, because the offense is there. Jackson Dart's one of my favorites to win the Heisman this year. They have a crazy wide receiver room. They got Trey Harris, Juice Wells from South Carolina. They have tons of guys. Jalen Watkins, Justin Watkins, whatever his name is, another dog at receiver. I don't know why I blanked on his name like that. But they have a lot of studs on that offense. But the defense was the problem. So they went all in the transfer portal and brought in just about every single top defensive player that entered the portal. They got Walter Nolan, the highest rated player in the portal this past cycle from Texas A&M. They have studs up and down the field now. But will they be able to gel this season and really take that team to the next level? That's the biggest question. Can the defensive additions gel? South Carolina, Lenora Sellers. That's it. That's my only question. Lenora Sellers. All the talk from South Carolina spring camp and fall camp, even last season when Spencer Rattler was the quarterback, they were like, yeah, Spencer's our guy. But man, this dude Lenora Sellers can ball. He's a dog. Can Lenora Sellers be for South Carolina what Anthony Richardson was for Florida? If you don't remember, when Anthony Richardson was the starting quarterback at Florida, that team has went as far as he went. If Anthony Richardson had a career game, Florida was going to win it. If Anthony Richardson had a bad game, Florida was going to lose by double digits. Can Lenora Sellers be for South Carolina what Anthony Richardson was for the Florida Gators a few years back? That's the biggest question. Last four. Tennessee. Is Nico the way back to the top of the SEC? Now, they didn't make it to the top, but they were very close a couple years back with Hendon Hooker. Matter of fact, last night, Hendon Hooker had a crazy run for the Lions last year. I'm so happy to see him healthy. Call him Lamar 2.0. They just don't know how Hendon Hooker can sling it. But a couple years back, they were an insanely good team with Hendon Hooker. If he didn't get hurt that season, I think he would have had my vote to win the Heisman Trophy. But is Nico Iamaleava the key to get back to the top? Because last year, Joe Milton at quarterback didn't pan out the way a lot of people thought it would. Those big-time throws that he made at the passing academy and in the offseason and training camp didn't too much translate. Even the throws that he made that season when Hendon Hooker went down, for some reason the play didn't translate. He never looked comfortable with Tennessee. Is Nico the answer? Will Nico pan out? A lot of people think he will. Extremely high-rated prospect in a couple classes ago. High 5-star out there killing people in them 7-on-7s, rocking them pajama pants. A lot of people love Nico. Tennessee fans already love him, and all he did was play in the bowl game where he balled out against a tough Iowa defense. It was very promising. But will Nico be enough to bring Tennessee back into that SEC championship conversation? That's the big question here. Now, almost done. Texas A&M. Is there enough on this team to have immediate success with their new head coach, Mike Elko? Now, let's rewind back a few years. 2019, was that 2019? 2022 recruiting class, excuse me. Texas A&M brought in the highest rated recruiting class of all time under Jimbo Fisher. It was ridiculous. The greatest recruiting class of all time. What did they do with it? Nothing. They underachieved year in and year out. Jimbo Fisher wasn't the answer. They had all the right ingredients there, but they had me back there in the kitchen trying to get me to make a meatloaf. I don't know how to cook. Matter of fact, I can cook. I can cook some breakfast food. Now, look, if you gave me all them ingredients and said, hey, Richard, I need some waffles, eggs, bacon, some sausage, maybe even some banana pudding, look, I'm your guy. I got you. But you telling me to make some beef Wellington, you got all the ingredients. You might even have step-by-step written down. That beef Wellington ain't going to turn out how you think it's going to turn out. That's exactly what happened at A&M. They had all the ingredients in the kitchen, but they didn't have the right chef. So they just kicked Jimbo Fisher to the curb after years of underachieving, and they bring in Mike Elko, the head coach from the Duke Blue Devils, making something out of nothing at Duke. Duke has been a great team the past couple years, big-time win against Clemson last season. So you bring in a guy like Mike Elko, a dynamite head coach, and give him all these resources. Texas A&M at its peak has shown they might just have the best resources in college football. I point back to that 2022 recruiting class, the greatest of all time. They have shown what they can do. So you go out and grab who we know is a great head coach in Mike Elko and drop him in there with all those resources. it's hard not to see immediate success in their future. But the main question is, I'm going back to it, is there enough still there? Because a lot of people transfer from that roster. Evan Stewart's gone. He's at Oregon. Walter Nolan's gone. A lot of the crown jewels of that top-tier recruiting class have bailed out. So do they have enough to still have immediate success this year? We'll give you a little sneak peek from my dark horse. I think they do. I think Connor Wegman at quarterback, he's a monster. He's one of those guys like I can see winning the Heisman in the next few years. He is a beast at quarterback. I think they might just have enough. Now, the Texas Longhorns. Earlier this week, I had a completely different question for them. But now, it's hard not to say C.J. Baxter. Because when you look at Steve Sarkisian offenses, they pretty much always stem around, yes, a dynamic quarterback that Quinn Ewers, a lot of people think he can be. Last year he had a good year. But this year, a lot of people expect him to have a great year. I'm not sure if he's going to do all that. But Steve Sarkisian offenses typically have a really good quarterback. We can drop Quinn Ewers in that hat. But they also always have a dynamite running back. All the years where Steve Sarkisian has been either an offensive coordinator or a head coach, and the team has had tremendous and the team has had tremendous success, they've had an 1,000-yard rusher. Well, C.J. Baxter was supposed to be that guy for Texas this year. Extremely highly rated running back coming out of high school, is a 5-star guy, very dynamic. A lot of people had him penciled in as a top 5 running back in college football before the season even started. Well, now he's out for the season. Just tore his knee up about a week ago. Big time loss for Texas. Will they still be able to produce without him? Will the loss of C.J. Baxter have a big time impact on this team? I'm not quite sure how big of an impact it's going to have. They might do a running back by committee thing over there and still have some success, but it's hard to replace a talent like C.J. Baxter. It's going to be interesting to see how they work new guys in and supplement that, because they do have some good running backs. They've been bringing in great recruiting classes. They have other good backs on that roster, but do they have a guy that can replace C.J. Baxter? It is yet to be seen. The season hasn't started yet. Now, last but not least, let's go over to Vandy. Let's go on out to Nashville. What is the question for Vandy, man? What is it? Last year, their team, they didn't win a conference game, but they had some stars on their team. They had London Humphreys at receiver. They had a very solid quarterback. They had Will Sheppard at receiver. They had some guys. Well, all of them transferred. London Humphreys is at Georgia. Will Sheppard's at Colorado making highlight plays. I just saw him on YouTube the other day balling out in practice. So if I'm a Vanderbilt fan, which thank God I'm not. I'm not strong enough for that. I'm just not. I'm nowhere near strong enough for that. But if I'm a Vandy fan, put myself in their shoes, what would be my biggest question? Can we win a conference game this year? How about that? Can Vanderbilt win a conference game this year? That's it. Simple. Is there enough on this team to win? Not two, just one conference game this season. That'd be my main thing if I was a Vanderbilt fan. And that's the entire SEC. Those are all my questions. Well, those are my biggest questions for every SEC team this year. Now, at the beginning of that, I said I was thinking about talking about who I feel are the top contenders in the SEC this year, and we might as well go ahead and do it. Why not? If I'm looking at the SEC, I just gave a brief run through of every single team in the conference. I'm down about 3 teams that I feel can really have a shot of playing in and winning the SEC championship this season. The Georgia Bulldogs, obviously. Even if their defensive line doesn't step up to elite level, they'll still be one of the top 3 teams in the country this year. Now, they have a very rough schedule, and that may stop them from making the SEC championship. They have a game at Ole Miss, at Texas, and at Alabama this year. 3 extremely tough road games. So if they can find a way to make it unscathed through those 3 games and somehow still have an undefeated season, they're without a doubt the best team in the country. But I don't think they're going to make it through those 3 games unscathed. They're going to end up dropping one. Whether it's a game at Ole Miss, at Texas, or at Bama, 1 or 2 of those games will be dropped. That won't be detrimental for this Georgia team because it'll still allow them to make this expanded 12-team playoff, but those 2 losses might hold them out of the SEC championship game. But I'm still going to keep Georgia in there because as long as Kirby Smart's their head coach, they're still a contender to win the SEC. Then you have the Texas Longhorns. I think they're an extremely talented team this year. They lost a lot at receiver, but they've also brought in a lot at receiver. They've been recruiting at another level. They've reached the status of these teams like Alabama and Georgia, where when they lose players, they don't have to rebuild. They just reload with monster recruiting classes and monster transfer portal classes. I think Texas is going to be right in the mix, even with the loss of C.J. Baxter. I think they're going to – it's hard to replace a talent like that, as I said earlier. But I do think they have some other solid running backs on that roster that will be able to carry the weight while he's gone this season. So Texas is right up there with Georgia. And my third team right now is Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is going to be a very, very good team this year. I wouldn't be surprised if Jackson Dart takes a trip up to New York for the Heisman ceremony. I'm not saying he's going to win it, but I do think he's going to be right up there in the Heisman conversation the entire year and might just get invited out to New York. He's going to have a great season. He had a great season last year, but I think this year he's going to take that next step with this monster running back room that they have. They lost Quinshon Judkins, so a lot of people are sleeping on him, but they have a guy named Ulysses Bentley out there. Yeah, his name is Ulysses, like S. Grant, but Ulysses Bentley the fourth, dog at running back. He's not as good as he should be in college football 25 right now, but once the season gets started, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a 90 overall. So they still have it in the backfield. Their wide receiver room, as I stated earlier, is ridiculous. They went out and it was ridiculous last year, but they went out and got South Carolina's best weapon, a guy that was arguably one of the best receivers in the SEC last year in Juice Wells, a dynamic playmaker, and add him to that offense. And then you look at the defense. The way they've loaded up in the transfer portal, it's hard not to see them as one of the better defensive units in the country this upcoming season. But they don't have to be one of the best units in the country. They just need to be improved. I view this Ole Miss team as I view last year's LSU team. If they can have a top 15 to 20 defensive unit in the country this season, I think it's a team that can push almost anybody and contend not only for an SEC championship, but a national championship. I'm thinking this highly of Ole Miss this year. Now, a lot of people might call me crazy. They don't think Lane Kiffin can win the big game. They can't do this. They can't do that. I wouldn't say can't. I just think they haven't done it yet. Why? There's no better time than the present. They haven't done it yet. Yeah, Lane Kiffin has not won the big game yet. He hasn't beaten Alabama. He hasn't beaten Georgia. But why not now? Why not this year with this team? I hinted on it a little bit earlier, but I think this Ole Miss team is exactly why Lane Kiffin did not take the job at Alabama this past year, because I definitely think it was offered to him. Now, I don't have any inside sources. I don't have anything. But I do think he was at the top of Nick Saban's list to take his job. And I think he denied the job because of how good this year's Ole Miss team was. I think this is the team he's been building towards, and I think they're going to have a lot of success this year. Now, a dark horse for the SEC this year is difficult because when you look at the landscape, there are a lot of good teams out here. A lot of people saying LSU, they think their defense is going to improve. They could be a dark horse. Some people are even saying Alabama. I wouldn't even count Alabama as a dark horse because of who they are. Even though they lost Nick Saban, this is a team that is still going to be there. Their roster is still ridiculous. They're still recruiting at an insanely high level. They are hitting the transfer portal hard, and Kalen DeBoer is a great head coach. Alabama's going to be right in there in that SEC championship conversation. I didn't put them in that top 3, but that don't mean I don't have them at 4. But I digress. When I'm thinking about my dark horse for the SEC this year, I look no further than College Station. I think Texas A&M is the dark horse to make the SEC championship this year, maybe even win the SEC and make the playoff. I'm not saying they're going to. This isn't my prediction show. I'm probably going to do conference predictions starting next week. But I think Texas A&M could be a very good team this year. Mike Elko, as I said a second ago, is a great head coach. He was fantastic at Duke. So then you take him from Duke, who's a basketball school. Let's not get this 2 to 3 year gap of success confused here. They're a basketball school, and their resources are in basketball. You take Mike Elko from Duke and drop him in A&M, a team that has shown over these past few years they're not afraid to go all in on football. They have the backing. They have the NIL money. They have everything they need. They have all the resources necessary to be one of the top spending college football programs in the country. You take Mike Elko and give him all those resources, what do you expect? I know what I expect. I expect success. And I think that's what we're going to get from Mike Elko. It might not happen immediately this year, but I can see it happening because they already have their quarterback in Connor Wegman, who I feel could be one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the SEC by the end of this season. Top 3 might be steep. Hold on. Because you have Jalen Milroe, Carson Beck. I'm still going to say, I'll say top 5. A guy in Connor Wegman who could be a top 5 quarterback in the SEC by the end of this season. He's extremely talented. Matter of fact, I'm not backtracking. He could be top 3. He really could. He is that good. I think Connor Wegman is that good. He had a devastating injury that cut his season short last year, but that guy can ball at the quarterback position. I liked what I saw from him last season. Even in the games they lost, he put a lot of good tape on. He put a lot of good ball on tape. I'm excited to see what he can do with the brand new head coach and with a fully healthy season. I'm not sure how much meaningful returning production they have on this team. They lost a lot. As I said, they lost their top receiver, Evan Stewart. They lost a lot on the defensive end. But I have so much faith in Mike Elko as a head coach. I think even with all those departures, they could still put together a very good 8-9 win season. And even at their peak, as I said to begin this segment, contend for an SEC championship. I think Texas A&M is going to be that good this year. And just over the next few years, I think they're going to be one of the top programs in the SEC. I'm going to be doing this same show like a year and some change from now, and I'm going to have them in that same top 3 with Georgia, with Texas. They'll probably take Ole Miss's place. They'll be right up there with Alabama, Georgia, and Texas as a team that could easily win the SEC and be one of the better teams in the country. I think that highly of Mike Elko, and I think that highly of Texas A&M as a program. At their best, they could be the best. Book it. Now, I'm going to take a look at the live chat for a little while. See what everybody's talking about. I'm trying to get used to doing this and looking at the live chat. You know, I'm gonna get my rhythm after a while. We're gonna figure it out. It's gonna take some time. But I hope everybody's enjoying the stream right now. Let me know how you feel about it in the live chat. I'm sitting here. I got to pull it up on my phone right now. Still trying to figure everything out, get the hang of everything. If you have any questions about anything I've been talking about or something that you might want me to talk about in this stream or another stream, go ahead and say it in the live chat. We could talk about it now, have a quick little back and forth. Who knows, man? All right, not much is going on in there right now. But I do want to take a second to talk about a few of the preseason games that are coming on tonight. I know the Falcons take on the Dolphins in about an hour's time. They play at 7. That's going to be a really good game to see. I don't expect Kirk Cousins to play, period, especially after the injury he's coming off of from last season. But Michael Penix is who I'm very excited to see. I've heard a lot of good things about him from Falcons camp this year. They're loving that accuracy. They're loving the deep ball. He's very athletic, which a lot of people seem to forget. He ran like, a 4.5 40. When he was at Indiana, When he was at Indiana, he used his legs much more than he did at Washington. Now, he has suffered a lot of catastrophic injuries, tore his ACL twice while he was at Indiana, but he's still a darn good athlete. And a lot of people just kind of forget about that and just look at how he throws a deep ball and thinks he's just a statue in the pocket, but Michael Penix can move. I'm excited to see what he's going to do in this Falcons game tonight. I'm very excited to watch it. Even though it is just preseason ball, it's still our first look at these rookies. Kind of get fans excited for the season and what's to come, because I do think he's going to take over in like a year and a half. But might as well. I was going to end the stream after that SEC talk, but I think I'm going to go ahead and do one more segment. I do have one more thing prepared. I want to take this time to talk about the NFC South, because a lot of people view the NFC South this season as maybe the worst division in football after they had a very down year last year. But I don't think they're the worst division in football. I think that might just be the most underrated division in football. And we were just talking about the Falcons' upcoming preseason game. Let's start off by talking about the Falcons then. Let's talk about Kirk Cousins, a guy who only played 8 games last year but threw for over 2,300 yards, 18 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions, completing over 69% of his passes. He was balling. Nice. But he was derailed by a catastrophic Achilles injury that ended his season. But the Falcons came in and signed him. And that's exactly what the Falcons needed. The Falcons need a guy at quarterback that can help take this team to the next level, because this Falcons team is insanely talented. This is a team where you look at their backfield and with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, and that might be one of the best backfields in football this season. A lot of people are talking about drafting Bijan Robinson in the top 5 of their fantasy drafts, and I can't be mad at them for doing it. He's at the top of my draft boards as well. I can see him having well over 1,200 rushing yards this season, and that backfield as a whole getting close to 2,000 rushing yards between him and Tyler Algier. I have very high hopes for that Falcons team, but this is just a running game. That rushing attack opens up the play-action pass game with guys like Drake London, with Darnell Mooney, with Kyle Pitts, who we've still yet to see him fully unlocked. We know, those of us that are big fans of college football, we remember what Kyle Pitts was at Florida. We even saw what Kyle Pitts did in his first year with the Falcons when Matt Ryan was still slinging the rock. He had over 1,000 receiving yards. But that was still just scratching the surface. A lot of people think he underachieved that year, even though he had 1,000, felt like he could have done more. So when you go out and get a guy like Kirk Cousins, a big-time quarterback, pocket passer, he's going to put the ball where it needs to be placed. That's perfect for a guy like Kyle Pitts, a guy who's been, since Matt Ryan left, hasn't really had an answer at quarterback. Last year, Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke were back and forth at quarterback. The year before that, Marcus Mariota was playing for the Falcons and gave up on the team mid-year. I mean, this is exactly what the Falcons needed. That big-time running back room, a dynamite quarterback, a guy that would have been in the MVP conversation last season if he hadn't got injured. That receiver room that is already just about there. And a defense that's probably top 15 in the NFL. Statistically, they weren't last year, but I think they would have been a top 15 unit if their offense was decent. Because every 2 seconds, they were having to go right back out on the field again. So with this top-tier offense, it's going to help that defense even more. I think this Falcons team is going to be insanely good this year. But they're not the only team in the division this year. They're not the only team that can win this division this year. Let's talk about the team that won it last year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield had a career resurgence for the Buccaneers last season, throwing for over 4,000 yards with 28 touchdowns compared to only 10 interceptions, completing over 64% of his passes. He balled out last season. They won a playoff game. They were a good team last season. They got put out in the playoffs. They actually put the Eagles out of the playoffs and were later put out by the Detroit Lions in what was a really hard-fought and scrappy game that last year in the postseason. This team's going to be right back at it this year. They still have Mike Evans. They still have Chris Godwin. They still have a very solid defense led by Antoine Winfield. This is a team that's going to be back ready to compete for this division again this season. Their main problem is the same thing that they've struggled with last year. Their lack of a run game was the issue. Rachaad White was a beast on fantasy football teams last year, but their running game still wasn't that great. He did a lot of work out of the backfield. He was still punching a few touchdowns, running the rock, but their rushing offense wasn't where it needed to be. They had one of the worst rushing attacks in the league last season. And it's surprising because they had a great offensive line. And they have had a great offensive line ever since Tom Brady was the quarterback. But for some reason, their rushing attack couldn't click. That's the main thing they need to work on if they really want to win the South this year. They need to be able to run the ball, especially now that the Falcons are going to be much more improved than they were last season. And then we have the New Orleans Saints. On paper, Derek Carr had a great year. Over 3,800 over 3,800 passing yards, 25 touchdowns compared to only 8 interceptions, completing over 68% of his passes. It seems like he had a good year on paper, but for some reason, it did not translate for that Saints team. Something which wasn't right. Alvin Kamara had another Alvin Kamara year. He was good. Their defense was a top 10 unit in football. They were really good. Chris Olave took that next step as a wide receiver and is showing that he's a wide receiver one in this league. He's one of the most underrated and undervalued wide receivers in this league. A lot of people just aren't paying attention to what he's doing because the Saints aren't good. So what do the Saints need? I don't know. Jesus? Maybe they just need to pray more. I don't know what's going on, but something's not working. But honestly, I think they need a little more help at receiver. Maybe stoke up the offensive line a little bit more, but Chris Olave at receiver cannot be their only answer. They thought Michael Thomas was going to have a career resurgence last season like how Baker Mayfield did, but after that first game against the Falcons, he was non-existent. He just no-showed the rest of the season. So that's what I think they need. Chris Olave cannot be the only receiving weapon on that team. They need another big-time guy to step up. Now, if Michael Thomas was still the Michael Thomas he was when Drew Brees was the quarterback, I might pick them to win the South. But until they show that they have another difference maker at wide receiver, the Saints aren't all there yet. And now lastly, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers. I talked about them earlier in the show. I think they're going to be one of the most improved teams in football this season. And it all starts with Bryce Young. It starts and ends with Bryce Young. People call him a bust already. I wouldn't go that far. Now, he had a rough season last year. 2,800 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, only completing 59% of his passes. He didn't have a great season. I understand that. It doesn't take a blind man to see that. But I do think they have added enough this offseason to really improve this team. As I talked about earlier, they went out and got Clowney, a guy that had over 10 sacks last season on the Ravens. Deontay Johnson, any quarterback's best friend. Jatavian Sanders, big-time tight end receiving option from Texas. Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis to help stoke up that offensive line. And Jonathan Brooks to help with the running game. The defense was already good last year, but they went out and got Bryce Young exactly what he needed to improve his stats. They helped stoke up that offensive line. They got weapons from the draft and from free agency. They traded for guys. They went out and got Bryce Young everything he could need to improve his game. And I think he's going to do that. Now, I'm not picking them to win the NFC South, but I do think the Panthers are going to be a much improved team, largely because of an improvement in Bryce Young's play due to the weapons that they have brought in and surrounded him with. I'm excited to watch the Panthers this year. I'm excited to watch Bryce Young this year. I think he's going to take strides and begin to show people why he was the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft class. I believe in Bryce Young. I believe in the Carolina Panthers. But I'm not picking the Carolina Panthers to win the NFC South. If I'm picking right now today, I'm picking a team that plays football today. I'm picking the Atlanta Falcons to win the NFC South. I'm in love with this Falcons team this year. Now, I was the guy screaming from the rooftop that they need to sign Justin Fields, and I still stand on that. They could have easily signed Justin Fields. I think he would have been a great fit with this team. Adding him to that dynamic run game, oh my gosh, it would be ridiculous. He'd probably run for over 600 yards. Bijan will have over 1,000. Algier will have over 600. It'd be ridiculous. Then the play action passing, oh my God. What's even they say? Don't get me to salivating. I don't even want to think about it. It could have been incredible. But I still think it's going to be incredible. I think Kirk Cousins is going to have a great season for the Falcons this year. That rushing attack is going to help a lot. That receiving core is already really good. I think Kyle Pitts is going to have a career season. Fantasy football players, now is your time to finally draft Kyle Pitts. I know he's let you down over the past few seasons, but I'm thinking about drafting him myself. I believe in the Falcons this year. That defense is also really good. I believe in their new head coach, Raheem Morris, who was the interim head coach for them a few years back. I believe in the Atlanta Falcons this year. I'm completely bought in, and I'm picking the Atlanta Falcons to win the NFC South this season. Now look, I appreciate all of you for tuning into my first ever live stream. I think I've gone, about 30, 40 minutes? I'm not 100% sure. I don't know how to keep track of the time while I'm doing it because I didn't start right at 5. I don't know when I started. But this was a lot of fun. Expect live streams twice a week. I almost said every 2 weeks. Twice a week, especially once the college football and NFL season gets started. I'm going to do 2 shows a week. On Monday, I'm going to do Richard's Review, where I'm going to be reviewing all the games that happened the past weekend. And then on Friday, I'm going to be doing Dick's Picks. Dick's Picks is back. I'm going to be picking all the biggest games in college football and the NFL, giving my predictions, going over the keys for the teams to win the game, going over everything. So stay tuned for that. It's all coming soon. There will be 2 live streams a week, every week for the foreseeable future. I don't see it stopping anytime soon. We're going all in on it. These streams will continue to improve each and every single time. I'm going to keep working on it. If you have recommendations and things you want to see me do in the live streams, be sure to let me know either in the live chat. I know a lot of you have my phone number, so look, just text me. Let me know things that you want to see added to the show. If you know some ways I can improve some things, be sure to let me know. I'm an open book. I'm willing to grow at it. I'm willing to grow with y'all. We're all in this together. We're looking to do it big. This is just the beginning. I can't wait to keep going. I appreciate all of you for tuning in.